Martin Calloway was 61 years old, a billionaire, and he had just spent $40 at a thrift store buying clothes so his daughter's fiancé wouldn't recognize him. He stood in the parking lot of a Goodwill on the far side of Hartford, a paper bag in his hand, and thought, "This is completely reasonable." It was not completely reasonable. But 3 weeks ago, Elise had stood in his kitchen with her eyes wet and told him he was the only person making her unhappy. And 2 weeks ago, Derek Solis had proposed. And somewhere between those two moments, Martin had stopped asking himself whether the plan was a good idea and started asking himself how to execute it. So here he was. $40. A bleach-stained flannel shirt. Boots a half size too big. The argument had started simply enough. "You've been cold to him for 3 months, Elise had said. Every dinner. Every visit. You barely look at him. I look at him. You look at him the way you look at people you're about to fire." Martin hadn't had a response to that. Mostly because it was accurate. Elise pressed her hands flat on the counter. "He proposed to me, Dad." I said yes. This is happening. And I need to know if you're going to be part of it or stand on the outside making judgments about a man you've never actually tried to know. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From a man who treats me well? From someone who has never once given you a reason not to trust him. She picked up her bag. Right now the only person making me unhappy is you. She left without slamming the door. That was somehow worse. Martin Calloway had built Calloway Supply Group from a single freight contract and $47,000 into a national distribution company operating in 14 states. He had done it carefully, patiently, and with a level of suspicion toward other people's motives that had served him well in business and poorly in almost everything else. His wife Carol had died 8 years ago. She was the person who kept him honest about himself. Without her, certain habits had hardened in ways he hadn't noticed until they started costing him something. Elise was 30. Sharp, independent, built her own life in environmental law without ever trading on his name. Derek was 29. Marketing manager. Decent salary, clean record, calm manner. Treated Elise with a consistency that was hard to argue with. Martin had been arguing with it anyway. Because Derek Solis was an ordinary man with an ordinary income who was now engaged to the daughter of a billionaire. And in Martin's experience, that was never entirely an accident. He had no evidence. He had a feeling, a history of being right about feelings, and a daughter too happy to see clearly. The disguise had seemed like the cleanest solution. Remove the wealth. Remove the name. Watch how Derek treated a man with nothing when no one important was watching. Carol would have called it paranoid. Martin called it due diligence. He put on the flannel shirt in the parking lot, right there between two minivans, and drove toward Derek's neighborhood. Martin spent a week refining the disguise before the first session. Worn boots a half size too big. A flannel shirt with a bleach stain on the left sleeve. He stopped shaving, let his hair go unwashed for 4 days, scratched the lenses of a pair of cheap reading glasses himself. On the 5th day he stood in his bathroom and barely recognized the man looking back. Good. He tested it on a Saturday, walked 3 blocks in his own neighborhood. 2 people he'd waved to from driveways for years walked past without a flicker. A woman moved her dog to the other side of the sidewalk as he approached. Martin thought, clean enough. The first session was a Tuesday. Martin positioned himself on the step of a closed dry cleaner half a block from Derek's building. Paper cup in front of him. Shoulders rounded. Eyes down. The morning commute moved around him like he didn't exist. Nobody looked twice. Derek came out at 7:52. Phone in hand, mid-conversation, quick pace. He walked past Martin without slowing. Martin noted it. Distracted morning. Not a fair read. He came back Thursday. Thursday, Derek came out earlier. Alone, no phone, relaxed pace. He passed within 6 feet of Martin and slowed. Looked down. Took 2 more steps. stopped. "You doing okay?" Derek said. Martin kept his head down and said nothing. "Cold this morning." Derek set his own coffee cup on the step beside Martin's paper one. "Take it. It's hot." He walked on without looking back. Martin sat there for 10 minutes staring at that cup. He thought, this is a decent man. I've been wrong. The thought was clear. Complete. He should have gone home and called Elise. Instead he came back Sunday. Farmer's market near Derek's building. And that was the session that nearly ended everything. Martin was against the wall, on his cardboard, when he heard a voice behind him. "Gerald? Gerald Hutchins, is that you?" He went completely still. An older man was crouching slightly, peering at him, a neighbor from 2 streets over. Frank Delworth, semi-retired accountant. Waved at Martin from his driveway at least twice a week for 11 years. Martin turned his face further toward the wall. Said nothing. Let his jaw go slack, eyes unfocused, the way someone looks when they've been outside too long. Frank stayed for 3 unbearable seconds. "Sorry, thought you were someone I knew." He walked on. Martin didn't move for a full minute. His heart was going faster than it had any right to. If Frank had looked 1 second longer. If he'd said Martin instead of some other name. If he'd pulled out his phone to check. The whole plan would have been finished. Not just finished. Finished in the worst possible way, with Elise finding out from a neighbor's confused phone call that her father had been sitting on a sidewalk in disguise near her fiancé's building on a Sunday morning. Martin stood up, put the cardboard in a trash can, and walked toward his car. He had made it 10 steps when Derek came out of the market behind him and stopped right next to a woman who had dropped her bag. Derek crouched immediately, gathered her things, handed them back. Then he turned and looked directly at Martin. Martin dropped his eyes. "Hey," Derek said, walking over. "You doing okay?" He held out a 20. When Martin hesitated, Derek said quietly, "There's a place on Elm, St. Augustine's. Hot breakfast Sundays. No cost." Then he walked on. Toward the coffee shop. Toward Elise. Martin stood beside his car with a $20 bill in his hand and Frank Delworth's voice still ringing in his ears. 2 things had just happened simultaneously. The closest he'd come to being caught. And the clearest proof yet that Derek Solis was exactly who Elise said he was. He got in the car. He still didn't call her. Then his phone buzzed. The secondary phone, the prepaid he'd bought with cash specifically for these sessions. He hadn't given the number to anyone. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. A text from an unknown number, "I know who you are. We need to talk." Martin read it twice. He typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came in under 30 seconds, "Someone who's been paying attention. Like you have. Let's meet." Martin looked up from the phone. The farmer's market moved around him, vendors, strollers, a normal Sunday morning that had no idea what was happening in the corner of it. He looked back down at the screen. He typed, "How did you get this number?" "Same way I found out everything else. Meet me before this gets more complicated. Your call." Martin stood up slowly. He put the cardboard in a trash can. He walked back to his car and sat in it with the engine off for several minutes. Someone had identified him. Someone had tracked a prepaid phone purchased with cash. That was not casual. That was someone who had been looking. The question was who? And the question underneath that was worse. Had Derek sent this message? Martin stared at the screen. Then he typed one word, "Where?" An address came back immediately. A diner on the east side of Hartford. Tomorrow. Noon. Martin set the phone on the passenger seat and drove home. He did not call Elise. Martin arrived at the diner at 11:50. No disguise. No point in one now. A man in a corner booth raised a hand. Around 45. Plain face, dark jacket, relaxed posture. A coffee cup in front of him. The look of someone who spent a lot of time watching people and had stopped being bothered by it. Martin sat down. "Mr. Calloway," the man said. "You have the advantage," Martin said. "I don't know who you are." The man placed a business card on the table. "Paul Greer. Independent Investigations. Hartford, CT. "Who hired you?" Martin said. "Derek Solis." The diner kept going around them, a waitress, a couple splitting toast, ordinary Monday sounds. "When?" he said. 7 weeks ago. Before the proposal. Before Elise stood in his office telling him about Derek driving to Springfield alone so she wouldn't feel financially pressured. What did he ask for? Full financial profile. Company ownership, trust structure, estate distribution. Who inherits what and under what conditions? Paul paused. He used the phrase company's value more than once. Martin looked at the table. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. "I have a daughter. 23. Paul picked up his coffee. "That's all." "Does Derek know about the disguise?" "No. I spotted you during location work near his building. Recognized you. Kept it out of the report." He met Martin's eyes. "That stays here." Martin left cash on the table and walked out. He drove home and sat in Carol's reading chair. He tried to build the innocent version of what Derek had done. Due diligence, maybe. Responsible preparation before a serious commitment. It didn't hold. An innocent man asked questions. He didn't pay someone to quietly map an estate. 2 days later, Derek called. "I was hoping we could have lunch. Just the two of us." "I'd like that," Martin said. Warm. Easy. Completely false. The restaurant was a quiet Italian place in West Hartford. Nice but not flashy. They ordered, made small talk, and about 20 minutes in Derek set his fork down. "I want to be straight with you," Derek said. "I know you have reservations about me. I'm not blind. And I don't want to spend the next 30 years being someone you tolerate." Martin said nothing. Listening. "I grew up without money. My dad ran a hardware store. When I understood who Elise's father was, I won't pretend that didn't create pressure I had to figure out how to carry." He held Martin's gaze. "I hired someone. A few months ago. To understand the financial picture before I proposed. Not to scheme. Because I wanted to know what I was walking into so I could protect her properly. I should have just asked you directly. I know that." The table was quiet. Derek hadn't flinched. Hadn't dressed it up. He'd laid it flat and left it there. Martin understood in that moment that he had two choices. Match Derek's honesty, tell him about the disguise, Paul Greer, all of it. Or say nothing and accept Derek's truth as a gift he hadn't earned. "I appreciate you telling me," Martin said. "It takes courage to say it directly." Derek visibly relaxed. "I just didn't want things between us." "There aren't," Martin said. They shook hands at the door. Derek looked genuinely relieved. Martin sat in his driveway for 10 minutes afterward. Derek had confessed without knowing Martin already knew. That was not a schemer. That was a man trying to start something clean. And Martin had smiled and nodded and said nothing true in return. That night Elise called. "How was lunch?" "Really well," Martin said. "I think I've been unfair to him. He's a good man." Elise went quiet. When she spoke her voice was thick. "That means everything, Dad." "I know. I'm sorry it took so long." He set the phone face down on the desk. The lie was comfortable. Clean on the surface. And underneath it, the disguise, the sessions, Frank Delworther's voice, Paul Greer in the corner booth, all of it still sitting there, perfectly intact. Waiting. 3 weeks passed. On the surface everything improved. Martin had dinner with Elise and Derek twice. He was warm, engaged, asked real questions and listened to the answers. Derek responded in kind, open, relieved, clearly glad the wall had come down. Elise was happier than Martin had seen her in years. It should have felt like resolution. It felt like standing on ice he hadn't tested yet. He was at his desk on a Wednesday afternoon when his office door opened. Not Ruth buzzing him. Not a scheduled meeting. The door simply opened, and Derek Solis walked in. Not called ahead. Not announced. Just there, jacket on, jaw set, the relaxed ease Martin had always associated with him completely gone. Martin's assistant appeared in the doorway behind him. "Mr. Calloway, I tried to." "It's fine," Martin said. "Close the door." She did. Derek didn't sit. He stood in front of the desk and looked at Martin the way someone looks when they've been rehearsing what they're about to say and have decided to skip all of it. "Paul Greer came to you," Derek said. "You've known about the investigation since before our lunch." Martin said nothing. "I need you to tell me that's not true," Derek said. "Because if it is, then everything you said at that lunch, the handshake, telling Elise you'd been unfair to me, all of it was a performance. And I need to know if that's the man I'm about to spend the rest of my life having as a father-in-law." The office was very quiet. "It's true," Martin said. Derek looked at him for a long moment. Something moved across his face, not rage, something quieter and harder than rage. "Did you enjoy it?" Derek said. "Sitting across from me while I told you the truth. Knowing you already had the whole picture. Did that feel like winning?" "No," Martin said. "Then why didn't you say anything?" Martin didn't have a clean answer. He had the real one, that he'd been a coward dressed up as a strategist, that accepting Derek's honesty without matching it had been the worst thing he'd done in the whole mess, but saying it out loud felt like exactly the kind of too little too late move that made things worse instead of better. "I don't have a good answer for that," Martin said. Derek nodded slowly. He picked up Paul Greer's business card from the corner of Martin's desk. Martin had never thrown it away, and looked at it for a second. "Set it back down." "Does Elise know?" he said. "Not yet." "She's going to." Derek straightened his jacket. "I won't start a marriage carrying this. That's not negotiable." He moved toward the door then stopped. "I came here because I wanted to look at you when I said this. I'm not doing this to hurt your daughter. I'm doing it because she deserves to know who the people in her life actually are." He left. Martin sat at his desk and looked at Paul Greer's card. There was no frame that helped. No version of this story that didn't require him to stand in front of his daughter and account for every piece of it: the thrift store, the cardboard, the scratched glasses, Frank Delworth almost recognizing him, the lunch, the handshake, all of it. He drove to Elise's apartment that evening without calling ahead. Elise answered the door in her work clothes, just home, a glass of water in her hand. She read his face the way she always read his face. She got that from Carol, and stepped back to let him in without asking why he was there. They sat in her living room. Martin on the couch, Elise in the chair across from him. He opened his mouth to start. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. "Derek." Elise looked at the screen too. Something shifted in her expression, not suspicion yet, just the alertness of someone who senses two things happening at once. Martin declined the call. "Dad," Elise said quietly. "What's going on?" He started with the disguise. He told it plainly, facts in sequence, no editorializing. The thrift store. The boots. The scratched glasses. The sessions outside Derek's building. Frank Delworth crouching down and almost recognizing him. The cardboard at the farmer's market. The $20. He didn't reach for justifications while he was telling it. He just laid it out. Elise didn't move. She held her water glass in both hands and listened. Then he told her about Paul Greer. The diner. Derek's investigation. The lunch, Derek sitting across from him, telling the truth without knowing Martin already had it. Martin smiling and shaking his hand and saying nothing in return. Then Derek walking into his office that afternoon. When he finished, the room was silent. Elise set her water glass down on the coffee table. Carefully. The way you set something down when you're managing how hard you want to put it. How many times, she said. The disguise. For sessions. About 3 weeks. While I was having dinner with you. While I was telling you how good he was to me. Yes. She nodded. Not the nod of someone accepting an apology. The nod of someone making sure the facts are exactly right before they speak. And at the lunch. Her voice was steady. When you called me after and said you'd been unfair to him. I meant that. I did mean it. But you already knew about the investigation when you said it. Yes. She stood up and walked to the window. Stood with her back to him. Martin waited. He didn't try to fill the silence. When she turned around, her eyes were wet but her voice didn't waver. Do you understand what you've done? Not to Derek. To me. Martin said nothing. You didn't test Derek, Dad. She looked at him directly. You tested whether I deserved your trust. That landed the way she meant it to. Martin felt it going clean and deep, the way true things do. Decided, she continued, without ever telling me, without ever giving me the chance to prove myself to you, or was no. I didn't. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word and she pulled it back. That's what hurts. Not the flannel shirt. Not the cardboard. The fact that you looked at my judgment and decided it wasn't worth trusting. Martin looked at his hands. I know. I'm not a contract, she said. I'm not a business decision. I'm your daughter. And I needed you to trust me the same way I've trusted you my entire life. The room was quiet for a long time. Then her phone buzzed on the table. She looked at it. 3 missed calls. Derek. She looked back at her father. You should go. I need to call him. Martin stood. He picked up his jacket. At the door he stopped. I'm sorry, Elise. She was already dialing. She didn't answer. He let himself out and pulled the door closed behind him. He stood on her doorstep for a moment in the dark, the street quiet around him, and understood fully, maybe for the first time since Carol died, what it actually cost to be the kind of man who trusted his fear more than the people he loved. Then he walked to his car and drove home alone. Martin drove home and did not sleep. He sat in Carol's chair in the study and looked at the bookshelf across from him and waited. Not for a specific thing. Just waited. By noon the next day the silence had its own weight. He didn't call Elise. He told her it was her call and he meant it. He went to work, came home, sat in the chair again. The call came at 7:30. Derek. Martin answered on the second ring. I'm not calling to argue, Derek said. His voice was even. Tired, but controlled. I just want to say one thing. Go ahead. I know why you did it. I'm not saying it was right. But I grew up watching my dad work himself down to nothing for people who didn't see him clearly, and I swore I'd never let that happen to someone I loved. A pause. You were trying to protect Elise the only way you knew how. I understand that even if I don't agree with it. Martin was quiet for a moment. That's a generous read. It's an honest one. Another pause. I also want you to know, the investigation I ran, I did it because I was scared too. Scared of walking into something I didn't understand and making mistakes that hurt her. It wasn't clean and I should have been upfront about it. You were upfront at lunch, Martin said. I wasn't. No, Derek said. You weren't. The line was quiet. Is she all right? Martin said. She's hurt. But she's all right. Derek paused. She loves you. That's not in question. What's in question is whether you trust her enough to stop managing her life from the outside. Martin closed his eyes. I know. She needs to hear it from you, Derek said. Not an apology. She doesn't need an apology. She needs to know you actually understand what you did wrong. There's a difference. There is, Martin said. Okay, Derek said. That's all I had. He hung up. Martin sat with the phone in his hand. He thought about what Derek had just done. Every right to be furious. Instead, he'd called to extend something that looked very much like understanding. Martin thought about the coffee on the step. The $20 at the market. The honest admission at lunch that Martin hadn't matched. All of it consistent. All pointing in the same direction. The problem had never been Derek. He called Elise the following morning. She picked up. I'm not going to apologize again, he said. I don't think that's what you need. It isn't, she said. I want to tell you that I understand what I did wrong. Not the disguise. The thing underneath it. I didn't trust you. I've been so afraid of losing you to the wrong person that I couldn't see I was pushing you away myself. He paused. Your mother used to tell me I built cases in private and decided I was right before anyone else got a chance to speak. She was right about that. She was right about a lot of things I didn't listen to closely enough. Elise was quiet. She would have liked Derek. I know she would have. She also would have been furious at you. I know that too. A small silence. Then, Derek wants to have dinner. The three of us. He thinks it's important we don't let this calcify into something permanent. Martin absorbed that. He suggested that. Yesterday afternoon. While he was still angry. Martin looked at the photograph on his desk, Carol and Elise at the beach, 12 years ago, both laughing at something out of frame. Tell him yes, Martin said. And tell him I said he's a good man. Not because I need him to know it. Because it's true and I should have said it a long time ago. The dinner was at Martin's house 3 days later. He cooked. Not because he was a particularly good cook, he wasn't, but because it felt important that it happen on his ground, under his roof, with him doing the work of preparation rather than sitting across a restaurant table where everything was managed and neutral. He made the pot roast Carol used to make on Sunday evenings. He found the recipe on an index card in the kitchen drawer where she'd kept them, her handwriting faded but still readable. He followed it exactly. Derek arrived with Elise at 6:30. They came in together, Elise's hand in the crook of Derek's arm, and Martin watched them from the kitchen doorway for just a moment before they saw him. They looked like people who had been through something hard together and had come out the other side still standing. He shook Derek's hand at the door. Derek met his grip without hesitation. They sat down. Martin served. For the first 20 minutes the conversation stayed careful, work, small news, the kind of surface talk that people use to warm a room back up after the temperature has dropped. Martin let it run its course. He didn't try to accelerate past it. Then Derek set his fork down and looked across the table. I want to say something and then I don't want to talk about any of it again after tonight, Derek said. If that's all right. Martin nodded. I understand why you didn't trust me. You built everything you have from nothing. You watched people take from men like you your entire career. And then someone with an ordinary salary shows up and wants to marry your daughter. Derek paused. I probably would have done the same thing in your position. Not the disguise specifically. A small, careful pause. But the suspicion. Yeah. I get it. Martin looked at him. That's more grace than I earned. Maybe, Derek said. But Elise loves you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making her happy. That works better if you and I are okay. Elise said nothing. She was looking at her plate, and Martin could see she was working to hold herself together. Martin put his fork down. I owe you a direct apology, he said. Not for being suspicious. Suspicion I can explain. I owe you an apology for the lunch. You sat across from me and told me the truth when you didn't have to. And I smiled and said nothing and let you think we were square. He paused. That was the worst of it. Not the disguise. That moment. Derek nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. That one stung. It should have. Martin looked at him steadily. It won't happen again. Derek picked his fork back up. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay. Elise looked up from her plate. Her eyes were bright, but she was smiling, the real one, the Carol smile. Can we eat now? She said. This is getting very intense and the pot roast is getting cold. Martin laughed. It came out surprised, the way real laughter does. Derek laughed too. The temperature in the room shifted. Not all the way back, it would take time. But enough. Enough to eat a meal together. Enough to talk about the wedding, which Elise wanted in the spring. Enough for Derek to ask Martin about the early days of the company and actually listen when Martin told him. By 8:30 the dishes were done and the three of them were in the living room with coffee, and Martin realized at some point that he had stopped monitoring the conversation. Had stopped watching Derek's eyes to see where they went. Was just sitting in his own house with his daughter and the man she was going to marry. It felt, for the first time in a long time, like enough. After they left, Martin stood at the kitchen sink and washed the last of the dishes by hand. He didn't need to, he had a dishwasher, but Carol had always washed the good pot by hand and he found himself doing the same. He thought about everything it had taken to get to a simple dinner. The thrift store clothes in a bag in his closet that he needed to throw away. The prepaid phone he'd already snapped in half and put in the trash. The index card with Carol's handwriting that he'd left on the counter instead of putting back in the drawer. He thought about what Derek had said on the phone 2 nights ago. She needs to know you actually understand what you did wrong. There's a difference. There was a difference. Martin understood it now in a way he hadn't before. An apology was something you gave to make yourself feel better about what you'd done. Understanding was something you carried forward and let change your behavior. He dried his hands on the dish towel and looked at the index card on the counter. Carol's handwriting. Faded blue ink. A pot roast recipe she'd made 100 times without needing to look at it, written down anyway so nobody would lose it. She had thought ahead. She had always thought ahead, not with suspicion, not with tests, but with the quiet care of someone who understood that the people you loved needed to be trusted with your whole heart or not at all. Martin picked up the card and put it back in the drawer carefully. He turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. For the first time in weeks, he slept without trouble. Knowing he had almost lost his daughter because he was too afraid to trust her.